The virus lockdown here in the UK happened around mid-March, and certainly for myself, but I'm sure like many of us, I was first really frustrated about the constraints, because normally I think we travel widely, and so that became a real challenge. But I started really to turn inwards and discover what was on my own doorstep, or hear what's on my own back garden. Because here, where we are, northeast of England, 55 degrees north, March coincided with the beginning of the urban dawn chorus, birdsong, and the arrival of spring. But when I started to hear that, I was really heartened by it and turned my microphones into my back garden rather to the wider world, and really started to rediscover what was on my own doorstep. I think one of the few advantages of being locked down by the coronavirus was the disappearance of noise. Certainly for us in urban areas, traffic noise all but ceased. Aircraft noise disappeared almost overnight, and we were entering this very different acoustic environment. And that meant, I think, for many of us, we started to hear more and then eventually tune in and listen. A blackbird took up a residency here in our suburban garden, and from early March began to sing to defend this territory and to advertise for a mate. And all this started to happen 10 metres above my head at the top of this cypress tree. During the nesting season, birds are territorial, and blackbirds will defend their patch by song. They'll regularly sing from prominent positions around the periphery of their territory, and the top of our cypress tree was a real favourite. It's always good before you start recording to look and listen, try to identify sites such as these, because they're very rewarding in that the bird will return here on a regular basis, sometimes every 20 or 30 minutes. So it becomes a very reliable source of sound. Because this song post was so reliable, I wanted to experiment with a range of different microphone techniques. So first of all, I chose this, one of my favourite stereo arrays. It's a pair of cardioid microphones spaced 17 centimetres apart and angled away from each other at 110 degrees. It's called ORTF, after Radio France, who devised this technique in the 1960s. And I really like the sound of recordings made using this system. The challenge was now getting this microphone array and a windshield up as close as I could to the singing blackbird. These telescopic microphone poles are most often used on film sets for suspending microphones over actors when recording dialogue. I like to use them for getting my microphones into otherwise inaccessible positions. In this case, up into the branches of this old apple tree, which is adjacent to the cypress tree where the blackbird song post is. And so using this technique, I can extend the microphone within about 3 or 4 metres, I think, of where the blackbird was singing. Once in position, I can then run a long cable back inside the house So that avoids creating any disturbance when I'm recording. And I can also record in comfort. There is no point being uncomfortable. I rigged the mics out here one evening and left them in position over several days. This is my ORTF recording of the blackbird singing here at 4 a.m. in mid-March. The mic array produces a really good wide-angle stereo ambience of the dawn chorus, with the blackbird singing centre stage. Now, when I listened back to that recording, it became clear to my ears that because of the lack of noise pollution from traffic and aircraft, I could hear all the other surrounding blackbirds in different territories. Now, if I could hear them, then certainly the male in our garden would be able to clearly hear its potential rivals. And I think that's one reason why a lot of people in urban areas during lockdown reported being able to hear songs of different birds more clearly and more loudly. It's not because they perhaps sing more loudly. I think birds have been singing more vigorously. Certainly the male blackbird in our garden has been singing more vigorously because it was all of a sudden aware of its potential rivals in surrounding gardens. And so it was singing more loudly to defend its territory. And of course, the females would also be listening. So it's quite likely that the female in this garden might quite fancy the song of the bird over the fence or down the road, and she would go over there and mate with that bird and perhaps several other rival blackbirds in the area, which of course is very good because it strengthens the gene pool. So all in all, it's been a really good season during lockdown for blackbirds and I guess most other birds. Now, because I was in isolation, I came up with this idea of wanting to isolate the song of that blackbird. and that required a different microphone array. So I chose this, a middle and side arrangement with a forward-facing gun microphone, and I used this system, just the forward-facing gun microphone, to isolate this blackbird's solo. This is my gun mic recording of the blackbird solo at 4:30 in early May. This became the first part of my track Unlocked for the Unsound Intermission album. As soon as we were unlocked, we came here to Dunstanburgh Castle on the coast of Northumberland, one of my favourite recording locations. The castle was built around 800 years ago, but the rocks, the foundation upon which Dunstanburgh Castle sits, are much, much older. They're part of the Great Whin Sill, a layer of volcanic rock which was pushed to the surface here, right on the coast, almost 300 million years ago. It's these rocks, this part of the Great Whin Sill, which form the foundations for Dunstanburgh Castle, and they're clearly formidable defences. But these cliffs are also home to a large community of seabirds, and it's their voices that I came here to record. For the first part of my track, Unlocked, for the Unsound Intermission album, I focused on the solo voice of a blackbird in my garden. Here, in contrast, I wanted to record this community of seabirds, many of them calling in flight and moving on and off the cliffs. And there's one bird here on these cliffs with a very special voice, a kittiwake. It's a white seagull with jet black wingtips. In English, kittiwakes are onomatopoeic, and they fly on and off the cliff ledges here at Dunstanburgh, calling their name. To record these seabirds in this very special acoustic, I chose this particular mic array. I'll take the windshield off. This is a double mid-side arrangement, recording on 3 channels, and it records a 360 horizontal sound field, which I can decode to stereo and choose the width in post-production. It's perfect for this kind of location where you perhaps need to vary the stereo angle or even focus in to a particular part of the sound field. And I'm going to point it over towards the sea cliffs. In order to record these kittiwakes within their sea cliff acoustic, the mics are backed off considerably from the source of the sound on the cliff ledges in order to soak up all the reverberation and sounds of the sea wash, because they really are the signature sounds of this place. The air is full of their plaintive calls, and local stories say that kittiwakes are the souls of children who drowned at sea.